Bon, on est live. On est putain de live. Bon, moi je touche à rien, hein. C'est trop compliqué là tout ça. Je vais chier si je touche à quoi que ce soit. Donc je vais pas m'essayer. Voilà, je vais laisser comme ça change rien à ma vie. Il devrait recorder dans le background. Bon, ça me distrait un peu d'avoir l'image du truc devant moi, mais c'est ça, je vais pas y faire grand chose, je pense. Je vais peut-être taper de quoi au-dessus. Ok, ça a l'air de bien fonctionner. Ah, streamer. C'est vraiment. C'est tellement compliqué. Bon, je pense qu'on y est là. Voilà, bah si les gens ils arriveront un jour. C'est galère mon truc. D'accord, ben voilà. C'est mieux que rien. C'est distrayant pareil, mais c'est mieux que rien. C'est méga distrayant pareil. Bon, je vais commencer en lisant un peu de Dalai Lama le temps que les gens ils se ramènent. Ça, c'est 100% pas légal de lire ça, donc voilà, ça l'est pas. Donc vous me stoulez pas et je vous stoule pas et on est tous contents. On est rendu au chapitre 9. Ethics and Suffering. Le livre, c'est Ancient Wisdom, Modern World. Ethics for the New Millennium. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. So we're at chapter 9, page 137 for people keeping track. Ethics and Suffering. I have suggested that we all desire happiness, that genuine happiness is characterized by peace, that peace is most surely attained when our actions are motivated by concern for others, and that this, in turn, entails ethical discipline and dealing positively with afflictive emotion. I have also suggested that in our quest for happiness, we naturally and properly seek to avoid suffering. Let us now examine this quality, or state, that we wish so strongly to be free from, but which lies at the very heart of our existence. Suffering and pain are inalienable facts of life. A sentient being, according to my usual definition, is one which has the capacity to experience pain and suffering. One could also say that it is our experience of suffering which connects us to others. It is thus the basis of our capacity for empathy. But beyond this, we can observe that suffering falls into two interrelated categories. There are the avoidable forms which arise as a consequence of such phenomena as war, poverty, violence, crime, and even things like illiteracy and certain disease. Then there are the unavoidable forms which include such phenomena as the problems of sickness, old age, and death. So far, we have mainly been speaking about dealing with avoidable human-created suffering. Now, I want to look more closely at that which is unavoidable. The problems and difficulties we face in life are not all like natural disasters. We cannot protect ourselves from them merely by taking suitable precautions, such as by storing food. In the case of sickness, for example, no matter how fit we keep ourselves or how carefully we regulate our diet, eventually our bodies give in to physical problems. And when they do, the impact on our lives can be serious. We may be prevented from doing the things we want to do and from going to the places we want to go. Often, we are prevented from eating the foods we like. Instead, we have to take medicines which taste awful. When things get really bad, we can find ourselves enduring days and nights racked with pain, to the extent that we may long to die. So far as aging is concerned, from the day we are born, we are faced with the prospect of growing old and losing the suppleness of youth. In time, our hair falls out, our teeth fall out, we lose our eyesight and our hearing. We can no longer digest the foods we once enjoyed. Eventually, we find that we cannot recall events which once were so vivid, or even remember the names of those closest to us. Should we live long enough, we will reach such a state of decrepitude that others may find the mere sight of us repulsive, though that is precisely the time we will have most need of them. Then death comes, almost a taboo subject in modern society, it seems. Though eventually we may look forward to it as a relief, and regardless of what may come afterward, death means that we are parted from our beloved, from our loved ones, from our precious belongings, indeed, from all that we hold dear. To this brief description of unavoidable suffering, we must, however, add another category. There is the suffering entailed in meeting with the unwanted, of mishaps and accident. This is the suffering of having what we want taken away from us. As we refugees have lost our countries, many forcibly parted from their loved ones. This is the suffering caused by not attaining what we desire, though we may put great effort into doing so. Despite breaking our back workings in the fields, the harvest fails. Despite working night and day at a business venture, it is not successful, though through no fault of our own. It includes also the suffering of uncertainty, of never knowing when, where we will meet with adversity. From our own experience, we all know how this can lead to feelings of insecurity and anxiety, and undermining everything we do. There is the suffering of lack of contentment, which arises even when we achieve all that we have striven for. Such events are part of our everyday experience as human beings who desire happiness and not to suffer. As if this were not enough, there is furthermore the fact that the very experiences which ordinarily we suppose to be pleasurable turn out themselves to be a source of suffering. They seem to offer fulfillment, but they do not actually provide it. A phenomenon we looked at earlier in the discussion of happiness. In fact, if we think carefully, we will find that we perceive such experiences as pleasurable only insofar as they offset more explicit suffering, as when, for example, we eat to assuage anger. We take one mouthful, then two, three, four, five, and enjoy the experience. But quite soon, although it is the same person and the same food, we begin to find eating objectionable. If we do not stop, eventually it will harm us. Just as nearly every worldly pleasure comes to harm us when carried to an extreme. This is why contentment is indispensable if we are to be genuinely happy. All these manifestations of suffering are essentially unavoidable and are indeed natural facts of existence. This does not mean that, finally, there is nothing we can do about them, nor do I mean to suggest that it is unrelated to the question of ethical discipline. It is true that, according to Buddhist and other ancient Indian religious philosophies, suffering is seen as a consequence of karma. To suppose, as do quite a lot of people, Easterners and Westerners alike, it seems, that this means that everything we experience is predetermined is totally wrong, however. Still less is it an excuse not to take responsibility in whatever situation we find ourselves. Since the term karma appears to have entered everyday vocabulary, it might be worthwhile to clarify the concept somewhat. Karma is a Sanskrit word meaning action. It denotes an active force The inference being that the outcome of future events can be influenced by our actions. To suppose that karma is some sort of independent energy which predestines the course of our whole life is simply incorrect. Who creates karma? We ourselves. What we think, say, do, desire, and omit creates karma. As I write, for example, the very action creates new circumstances and causes some other event. My words cause a response in the reader's mind. In everything we do, there is cause and effect. Cause and effect. In our daily lives, the food we eat, the work we undertake, our relaxation are all a function of action, our action. This is karma. We cannot therefore throw up our hands whenever we find ourselves confronted by unavoidable suffering. To say that every misfortune is simply the result of karma is tantamount to saying that we are totally powerless in life. If this were correct, there would be no cause for hope. We might as well pray for the end of the world. A proper appreciation of cause and effect suggests that far from being powerless, there is much we can do to influence our experience of suffering. Old age, sickness, and death are inevitable, but as with the torments of negative thoughts and emotions, we certainly have a choice in how we respond to the occurrence of suffering. If we wish, we can adopt a more dispassionate and rational approach, and on that basis, we can discipline our response to it. On the other hand, we can simply fret about our misfortunes, but when we do, we become frustrated. As a result, afflictive emotions arise and our peace of mind is destroyed. When we do not restrain our tendency to respond negatively to suffering, it becomes a source of negative thoughts and emotions. There is thus a clear relationship between the impact suffering has on our heart and mind and our practice of inner discipline. Our basic attitude towards suffering makes a great difference to the way in which we experience it. Imagine, for example, two people suffering an identical form of terminal cancer. The only difference between these two patients is their outlook on it. One sees it as something to be accepted and, if possible, transformed into an opportunity for developing inner strength. The other responds to his or her circumstances with fear, bitterness, and anxiety about the future. Now, although on the physical level there may be no difference between the two of them in terms of what they are suffering, in actual fact, there is a profound difference in their experience of this illness. In the case of the latter, in addition to the physical suffering itself, there is the added pain of inner suffering. This suggests that the degree to which suffering affects us is largely up to us. It is, therefore, essential to keep a proper perspective on our experience of suffering. When we look at a particular problem from close up, it tends to fill our whole field of vision and look enormous. If, however, we look at the same problem from a distance, automatically we will start to see it in relation to other things. This simple act makes a tremendous difference. It enables us to see that though a given situation may truly be tragic, even the most unfortunate event has innumerable aspects and can be approached from many different angles. Indeed, it is very rare, if not impossible, to find a situation which is negative no matter how we look at it. When tragedy or misfortune come our way, as surely they must, it can be very helpful to make a comparison with another event, or to call to mind a similar or worse situation that has befallen, if not ourselves, then others before us. If we can shift our focus away from self and toward others, we experience a freeing effect. There is something about the dynamics of self absorption or worrying about ourselves too much, which tends to magnify our suffering. Conversely, when we come to see it in relation to others' suffering, we begin to recognize that, relatively speaking, it is not all that unbearable. This enables us to maintain our peace of mind much more easily than if we concentrate on our problems to the exclusion of all else. As far as my own experience is concerned, I find that when, for example, I hear bad news from Tibet, and sadly this is quite often, naturally my immediate response is one of great sadness. However, by placing it in context and by reminding myself that the basic human disposition towards affection, freedom, truth, and justice must eventually prevail, I find I can cope reasonably well. Feelings of helpless anger, which do nothing but poison the mind, embitter the heart, and enfeeble the will, seldom arise, even following the worst news. It is also worth remembering that the time of greatest gain in terms of wisdom and inner strength is often that of greatest difficulty. With the right approach, and here we see once more the supreme importance of developing a positive attitude. The experience of suffering can open our eyes to reality. For example, my own experience of life as a refugee has helped me realize that the endless protocol, which was such an important part of my life in Tibet, was quite unnecessary. We also find that our confidence and self reliance can grow and our courage becomes strengthened as a result of suffering. This can be inferred from what we see in the world around us. Within our own refugee community, for example, among the survivors of our early years in exile, are a number who, though they suffered terribly, are amongst the strongest spiritually and the most cheerfully carefree individuals I have the privilege to know. Conversely, we find that in the face of even relatively slight adversity, some people who have everything are inclined to lose hope and become despondent. There is a natural tendency for wealth to spoil us. The result is that we find it progressively more difficult to bear easily the problems everyone must encounter from time to time. Let us now consider what options are open to us when we actually encounter a particular problem. At one extreme, we can allow ourselves to be overwhelmed. At the other, we can simply go on a picnic or take a holiday and ignore it. The third possibility is to face up to the situation directly. This involves examining it, analyzing it, determining its causes, and finding out how to deal with them. Although this third course may occasion us additional pain in the short term, it is clearly preferable to the other two courses of action. If we try to avoid or deny a given problem by simply ignoring it, or taking to drink or drugs, or even some forms of meditation or prayer as a means of escape, while there is a chance of short term relief, the problem itself remains. Such an approach is simply avoiding the issue, not resolving it. Once again, the danger is that, in addition to the initial problem, there will follow mental and emotional unrest. The afflictions of anxiety, fear, and doubt build up. Eventually, this can lead to anger and despair, with all the further potential for suffering, both for self and others, which that entails. Imagine being shot in the stomach. The pain is excruciating. What are we to do? Of course, we need to have the bullet removed and we undergo surgery. This adds to the trauma. Yet we gladly accept this in order to overcome the original problem. Similarly, due to infection or to catastrophic damage, it may be necessary to lose a limb in order to save our life. But again, naturally, we are prepared to accept this lesser form of suffering if it will spare us the greater suffering of death. It is only common sense voluntarily to undergo hardship when we see that by doing so we are able to avoid worse. Saying this, I admit that this is not always an easy judgment to make. When I was around 6 or 7 years of age, I was inoculated against smallpox. Had I realized how much it would hurt, I doubt whether I could have been persuaded that vaccination constituted a lesser suffering than the disease itself. The pain lasted fully 10 days, and I still have 4 large scars as a result. If the prospect of confronting our suffering head on can sometimes seem a bit daunting, It is very helpful to remember that nothing within the realm of what we commonly experience is permanent. All phenomena are subject to change and decay. Also, as the description of reality I gave earlier suggests, we are mistaken if we ever suppose that our experience of suffering, or happiness for that matter, can be attributed to a single source. Everything that arises does so within the context of innumerable causes and conditions. If this was not so, as soon as we came into contact with something that we considered good, automatically we would become happy. Whenever we came into contact with something that we considered bad, automatically we would become sad. The causes of joy and sorrow would be easy to identify, and life would be very simple. We would have good reason to become attached to one sort of person or thing or event, and to be angry with and want to avoid others, but that is not reality. Personally, I find enormously helpful the advice given in respect of suffering by the great Indian scholar saint Santideva. Shantideva. It is essential, he said, that when we face difficulties of whatever sort, we do not let them paralyze us. If we do, we are in danger of being totally overwhelmed by them. Instead, using our critical faculties, we should examine the nature of the problem itself. If we find that there exists the possibility we could solve it by some means or other, there is no need for anxiety. The rational thing would then be to devote all one's energy to finding that means and acting on it. If, on the other hand, we find that the nature of the problem admits simply to no solution, there is no point worrying about it. If nothing can change the situation, worrying only makes it worse. Taken out of context of the philosophical text in which it appears, as the culmination of a complex series of reflections, Shantideva's approach may sound somewhat simplistic, but its very beauty lies in this quality of simplicity, and no one could argue with its sheer common sense. As to the possibility that suffering has some actual purpose, we will not go into that here, but to the extent that our experience of suffering reminds us of what all others also endures, it serves us as a powerful injunction to practice compassion and to refrain from causing others pain. And to the extent that suffering awakens our empathy and causes us to connect with others, it can serve as the basis of compassion and love. Here, I am reminded of the example of a great Tibetan scholar and religious practitioner who spent more than 20 years in prison, enduring the most terrible treatment, including torture, following the occupation of our country. During that time, those students of his who had escaped into exile would often tell me that the letters he wrote and had smuggled out of jail contained the most profound teachings on love and compassion they had ever encountered. Unfortunate events, though potentially a source of anger and despair, have equal potential to be a source of spiritual growth. Whether or not this is the outcome depends on our response. Je suis rendu au chapitre 10, puis je vais ouvrir le prochain livre. Bonjour à la personne qui écoute. Comment vas-tu? Je ne sais pas qui tu es et je ne sais pas si je vois le chat. Tu peux mettre en de quoi dans le chat si tu veux. Comme ça, je saurai qui tu es. Si je vois le chat. Ou sinon, je ne saurais pas. Si je vois pas le chat. Deuxième livre. Philosophie of Albert Hubbard. The Philosophy of Albert Hubbard. C'est un très vieux livre. 1916. Je suis rendu à la page 11. The American Philosophy. American, my dudes. America. So this, then, is an essay on the American philosophy. The American philosophy is founded on the science of economics. Just here, in order that we may speak a common language, a few definitions are in order. Economics is the science of the production, distribution, and use of wealth. Science is accurate, organized knowledge founded on fact. Or as Herbert Spencer expressed it, science is the classified knowledge of the common people. All that which is simply assumed, believed, conjectured, taken on dogmatic statement, or mayhap read out of printed books, is unscientific, no matter how plausible. All practical businessmen are scientists. Business is a vocation. Philosophy is, or should be, an avocation. To make a business of philosophy is to institutionalize and dilute it, just as to institutionalize love and religion is to degrade and lose them. Religion is philosophy touched with emotion. Philosophy is your highest conception of life, its duties and its destiny. A religious organization is a different thing from religion. A religious organization is built on a feeling made static, or fear frozen stiff. It then becomes a superstition and is employed as a police system, and is taxed. All the traffic will bear. Science is definite, accurate, organized knowledge concerning the things that make up our environment. Modern philosophy is the distilled essence of wisdom that eventually flows from science. Or, if you please, philosophy is the explanation of science, a projection from science. Transportation, manufacturing, distribution, advertising, and salesmanship are all variants of business. Each and all are scientific, that is, capable of analyzation and demonstration. Weight, size, color, number, qualities, and time are all elements of science. Theology is antique and obsolete philosophy. It never is, nor ever was, scientific, not being derived from knowledge. Faith is the first item in its formula. Theology comes to us from dogmatic statements gotten from books or the hearsay words of men long dead. Theology is voodooism. In matters of importance, it is in the same class as alchemy, astrology, palmistry, mentology, and augury. Science is understood while theology is believed. Psychology is the science of human minds and their relationship one to another. Superstition is scrambled science, or a religious omelette flavored with fear. Organized religion, being founded on superstition, is, perforce, not scientific. And all that is not scientific, that is truthful, must be bolstered by force, fear, and falsehood. Thus, we always find slavery and organized religion going hand in hand. Business, to be successful, must be based on science. For demand and supply are matters of mathematics, not guesswork. Civilization turns on organization, and organization, in order to be of any value, must be scientific. Economics is a new science. History does not show a single instance of its existence in the days of Greece and Rome. They had simple mathematics but not complex fractions, percentage, statistics, averages were beyond them. The blueprint, even for humorists, was unguessed. Philosophy was speculation, business was barter. Since then, up to within a few years ago, the problem of how man could save his soul has been uppermost. This world has been neglected in the endeavor to gain another. When the science of economics is finally formulated, it will be expressed first in America. In America, all nations meet and blend. Here the factors, elements, and categories of economics are to be found. Here we have one language, and no more, and this is necessary for the expression of a new science. The first endeavor to found economics as a science was the work of Adam Smith. And when Thomas Henry Buckle said that Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations had influenced the world for good more than any other book ever written, save none, he stated truth. Economics changes man's activities. As you change a man's activities, you change his way of living, and as you change his environment, you change his state of mind. Precept and injunction do not perceptibly affect man, but food, water, air, clothing, shelter, pictures, books, music will and do. Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, and Karl Marx all wrote on economics, but none was an economist. Each based his logic largely on presumption, assumption, and hypothesis. If this happens, then that will occur. They were political economists. They pursued economics as a policy, not as truth. They loved love, not the lady. They were students of economics, and their work was not grounded in science. Since the days of Smith, Mill, and Marx, we have had many students of economics, but the world has not yet produced an economist. To be an economist, a man must be a scientist. He must be both a man of action and one who knows why he acts. He must work and he must contemplate his work. He must act and he must think. A scientist is the man who has done the thing, who has seen and knows. Then, from his positive knowledge springs his philosophy, and the philosophy of a businessman, analyzed, explained, and formulated, would constitute a science of economics. The American philosophy will be formulated by scientists, by businessmen who have succeeded. Thackeray's lawyer in the debtor's prison, who was working out of a new financial policy for the nation, was not a scientist. His knowledge was academic and his scheme conjectural. Science was outside of his orbit. He lacked experience. He had feelings, but not facts. He did not have enough cosmic mortar to construct an ark. Emotionalism, charity, altruism, optimism are not science, and they may be hysteria. Then I speak of success. When I speak of success, I do not mean it in the sordid sense. A successful man is one who has tried, not cried, who has worked, not dodged, who has shouldered responsibility, not evaded it, who has gotten under the burden, not merely stood off, looking on, giving advice, and philosophizing on the situation. In fact, the result of a man's work is not the measure of success. To go down with the ship in storm and tempest is better than to paddle away to paradise in an orthodox canoe. To have worked is to have succeeded. We leave the results to time. Life is too short to gather the harvest. We can only sow. Up to the year 1876, the business world was tainted by trickery in trade. The methods of booth and bazaar were everywhere practiced. Business was barter, and he who could cheat and not get caught was accounted clever. On the customs of the time, there was no copyright. They were a takeover from monarchical days. But a new ethic has arrived. Within 10 years' time, the thought has gone through the entire business fabric that to cheat and not get caught is really a worse calamity than to get caught. To be caught means that someone has applied the brake and you are given pause. Not to get caught means that you are headed for the precipice on the high clutch and downgrade. To cheat another is to cheat yourself. Theology did not teach us this, for precept and preaching never touch our lives. We shed them. We are moved in only one way, and that is by self interest. Cut off our food supply, and we are no longer apathetic, and self interest is a form of selfishness. It is the desire for life. It is the instinct of self-preservation in action. It was all a matter of mental growth, evolution. The discovery of truth as our most valuable business asset is the one great achievement of the age in which we live. For truth, there is no substitute, and this discovery was made by businessmen. Honesty as a working policy was first put forth by Benjamin Franklin, and his remark was regarded as a mere pleasantry until yesterday. The clergy have not yet adopted it. The doctors are considering it, and the lawyers haven't heard of it. However, all these will finally adopt it as a last resort, as a means of self preservation. Economics based on falsehoods leads to dissolution. Falsehood is a polite form of conquest. The lie is exploitation. The preacher has diverted us while the lawyer picked our pocket. The doctor gives you ether and accomplishes the same result. Egypt, Rome, and Greece lived on their slaves and outlying colonies. Slave labor is the most expensive kind. In time, the land is exhausted and the slaves die. But before this happened, the capitals that were the aristocrats who wasted, destroyed, and consumed had gotten nervous debility and were impotent, also impudent. Then they died, and the barbarian overran the land. A wise economist, and America as many, could have figured out exactly how long Babylon and Nineveh would have lasted. None of these ancient civilizations produced economists. They had soothsayer, priests, lawyer, poets, artists, clowns, dramatists, orators, rhetoricians, singers, philosophers, and most of all, they had guzzlers and gourmands. But they had no scientists. And their philosophy being based on augury, dreams, theology, and fear was futile and fallacious. A philosophy that is not founded on science is false in theory and base in practice. Modern business betters human environment. It means gardens, flowers, fruits, vegetables. It means quick, safe, and cheap transportation of people, commodities, and messages. It means books, maps, furniture, pictures, playgrounds, pure water, perfect sewerage, fresh air, sunshine, health, happiness, hope, light, and love. Because business gives opportunities for all to work, earn, grow, and become. Business consists in the production, transportation, and distribution of the things that are necessary to human life. Through this exercise of our faculties, we educe the best that is in us. In other words, we get an education. Inasmuch as business supplies the necessities of life, it is impossible to have a highly evolved and noble race except where there is a science of business. Business is human service. Therefore, business is essentially a divine calling. Once man believed religion to be the chief concern of mortals here below. Other men have thought that killing is the chief concern of mortals here below. Gladstone once said, "Only two avenues of honor are open to young men in England, the army and the church." This has been the prevailing opinion of the world for nearly 2,000 years, and is the one reason why the Dark Ages were dark. During those years of night, the fighting man was supreme. It was a long panic, and human evolution was blocked through fear. The race crawled, crept, hid, dodged, secreted, lied, and nearly died. We now say that the science of economics or business is the chief concern of humanity. Business is intelligent, useful activity. The word busyness was coined during the time of Chaucer by certain soldier aristocrats, men of the leisure class who prided themselves upon the fact that they did no useful thing. Men of power proved their prowess by holding slaves, and these slaves did all the work. To be idle showed that one was not a slave. But this word, busyness, first flung in contempt, like Puritan, Methodist, and Quaker, has now become a thing of which to be proud. Idleness is the disgrace, not busyness. The world can be redeemed only through business, for business means betterment. And no business can now succeed that does not add to human happiness. We believe that only the busy person is happy, and that systematic, daily, useful work is man's greatest blessing. We are a nation of workers, builders, inventors, creators, producers. We are the richest country per capita in the world, and our wealth has come from the farm, the forest, the factory, the mine, the sea. We have dug, plowed, pumped, smelted, refined, transported, and manufactured. We did not inherit our wealth, neither have we laid tribute on other countries, as did those earlier civilizations. Any individual who uses the word commercial as an epithet, who regards business enterprise as synonymous with graft and greed, who speaks of certain men as self-made and others as educated, who gives more attention to war than to peace, who seeks to destroy rather than to create and build up, is essentially un-American. The word education sometimes stands for idleness, but the American philosophy symbols work, effort, industry. It means intelligent, thoughtful, reasonable, and wise business. Helping yourself by helping others. The world's greatest prizes in the future will go to the businessman. The businessman is our only scientist, and to him we must look for a science of economics that will eradicate poverty, disease, superstition, all that dissipates and destroys. The day is dawning. On est rendu à Freedom and Responsibility. Page 25. I am told that hospitals, jails, almhouses, and insane asylums are for people who are unable to care for themselves properly. Therefore, they are sent to these places where men and women, specially delegated, spend their lives looking after them. So it seems that the incompetent, in addition to not adding to the wealth of the world, actually take competent people from a world of usefulness to minister to them. After a few years as a guard, the man is quite as incompetent as are the prisoners, and more so, because the prisoner works and the guard does nothing but guard. And for the man who works, there is a chance, but the man who doesn't is damned, body and soul. Hospitals, prisons, and poorhouses are places where people live who can't or won't work. These places do not cure our bodily or social ills. They are palliatives, all. They do not prevent incompetence, nor stop the production of the weak and incompetent. Every year, we have to pull down our hospitals and build greater. Ben Lindsay, Luther Burbank, John Davy, Horace Fletcher, all men, essentially of one type, are working to shut off the regular annual crop of criminals. Preachers have preached their silly tales of where we came from and where we are going to, directing the attention of man from this world to another, and with myth, miracle, mystery, with dead languages, dead ideas, and dead formulas, have scared the world stiff. That's why we are sick. We have bred from the worst in the worst possible way under the worst conditions. We have it thundered at us from a million pulpits that the indissoluble marriage tie was a sacred scheme devised by God Almighty, who also provided that woman shall be incarcerated in a kitchen. The result has been the doormat wife, with a liar for her husband, for men lie only to inferiors and tyrants, and a brood of legitimate candidates for hospitals, poorhouses, and prisons. Christianity was absolutely supreme for 1,000 years. Did she abolish poverty, disease, and crime? Not exactly. These things increased under Christian rule, and religion is not yet willing to step aside and give science a chance. Revivalists get 1,000 children in a room and play on their nervous sensibilities in the name of the gentle Christ, and then the doctors vaccinate them with pus from diseased animals, and we wonder why they die or go insane. The clerics killed Ferrer because he was working to make man free. Freedom means responsibility, and responsibility means the making of decisions. By deciding for ourselves, we grow, and this exercise of the will in deciding what is best to do and doing it is the only method of attaining growth known in nature. But woman's decisions have been made for her by male men, and so low has she sunk that millions of women are willing that this should continue. The passion for freedom is nature's cry for growth. A judge of the Supreme Court of the state of New York once said to me, "Divorce should be as free as marriage." And if it were, there would be no more separations than there are now. We give men and women the right to put their heads into a noose, but decline to let them pull their heads out. Those whom God hath joined together, no man can put asunder. No man can put asunder. Also the word illegitimate should be stricken from the judicial record forever. An act may be illegitimate, but the child never. "Why don't you talk like this in public?" I asked, and the answer was, "If I did, I'd lose my job inside of 24 hours." "Well," I said, "I'll say it for you. If you do and mention my name, but say you will not. You must not quote me. You can agitate. I can only conform." We are ruled by the archaic. We are working to make man free, and only a free people can be a healthy, happy, virtuous, self-reliant, and competent people. Keep her going, but on your life, don't quote me. Here's $2 to renew my subscription to the FRA. Le FRA, c'est un journal qui était écrit par Albert Hubbard à l'époque. Dolodosi. Rendu à page 30. Corporal punishment. Corporal punishment. Children's disease are a logical result of children's beatings. To shock, pain, grieve, anger, or violently suppress a human being is to run a grave risk of lowering that individual's physical vitality to a point where the person is an easy prey for any disease that happens along. That which interferes with the vital functions, even in a transient way, is not wise nor good. Extreme anger is apt to be followed by lassitude or some marked physical disturbance. In fact, it is well known that hate secretes a toxin which manifests itself in the breath and in the tissues. What we call a disease is a symptom of vitality, decreased to a point where the forces of dissolution are active. A shock which will blanch the cheek, disturbs the circulation, and interferes with the digestion. Perhaps the whipping did not mutilate, but it angered and shocked until a fever followed. Dyspepsia is a matter of the nerves. Much of our bad theology, if we could trace it, would be found to have its rise in indigestion, and that it has caused pathological disturbances of countless varieties, from cataract to acute mania, is known to every thinking physician. And of all causes of sickness, I know of none that has borne a greater crop of cosmic cockleburrs than the old time plan of whipping children. When Solomon put forth that unwise saying, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," an extent of harm was done the human race that no pen can compute. That one statement should have convinced every intelligent person that the Bible was just like every other book, good and bad in spots. If accepted literally, the Bible is an atrocious book, false, obscene, and misleading, tending to insanity, disease, and death. Fortunately, we are now allowed to take the Bible as the garbled literature of a barbaric and superstitious past, collected from many sources, and good and bad, wise and silly, sublime and vicious, all, all as the case may be. That millions of parents have bolstered their brutal tendency to punish and inflict pain by that remark about sparing the rod. Everyone knows. And always the tendency to beat the little thing, too weak to strike back, was more to ease the feelings of the parents than to improve and benefit the child. Moreover, it was educating the child, for the youngster grew up and inflicted upon its own children all the horror that it had itself endured. It was heir to the brutality, heir to the Bible, heir to the strap, birch, rod, ferule, and airbrush. So these were in daily use in all Christian homes. In my childhood, I remember a Baptist preacher who lived neighbor to us. This man was loud, lachrymose, brutal, a devout Christian, and a preacher of power, snatching many souls from the burning. The way that gospel sharp used to pass out his tidings of great joy broke in on my childish fancies. So I became convinced. So I became convinced that if God was really just, that pious, bawling beast who fed fat on our chickens would go to hell, sure, but I kept my suspicions to myself. This preacher had a strap cut from a side of sole leather, a strap 3 feet long, with tails, with which he used to beat up one of his 9 or 10 children every day, from the baby wearing diapers to a big boy of 16, and a girl full grown. They all got it. I have heard their cries for mercy ring out on a winter's night when they would run out into the yard to escape their pious parent intent on saving their souls. Once one of his daughters, a girl of 15, spent 10 cents for a blue ribbon and appeared in church with the ribbon in her hair. Her father saw her from his place in the pulpit. He noted her mark of pride. He denounced her before the congregation and expressed the hypocritical, pious pain that his own flesh and blood should be guilty of such devilish frivolity. Then he ordered her out of the church. When he got home after the service, he fell upon her with the strap. It pained him, but he felt it was his duty to correct her. The mother was a sick and undone little creature who twice had twins and bore at least one baby a year, except the year when her lord and master crossed the plains and got alkalied. And this woman really believed too that the children should be punished. And so she had a way of reporting them. Thus I'll tell your father I'll tell your father on you when he comes home. She too believed in Solomon, and she believed also in her husband's religion. Poor thing, she was too busy bearing babies to really think anything out for herself. But that Sunday afternoon, when her husband felt it is his duty to whip the daughter, the girl ran to the mother and demanded protection. The good man was laying on the strap, anywhere, over the girl's head, shoulders, her arm, and hands, although usually he picked out some choice portion of anatomy and did an artistic job. Yet this time the girl fought back, and she was only a slim slip of a thing, but now the womanhood in her was aroused. She felt insulted, she struck, she bit, she scratched, she screamed, and then she ran to her mother. Something in the little yellow mother was now aroused. Her child was being abused. Well, what of it? Hadn't she seen these whippings going on daily for 20 years? But this was different. The adolescent girl had only given way to her innocent and natural desire to put forth a little color and be beautiful. Now it was brute man against woman. The mother seized the strap. It was jerked through her clenched hands with such violence that it took the skin with it. The preacher had backed the girl into a corner, and with one hand, clutching her hair, was laying on the strap with the other. In the name of the Lord, the mother was behind. Suddenly, she seized a long-handled skillet that was on the kitchen stove. She swung it with both hands, and it landed square on the man's head. He was dazed and turned off around, and he got another one. He was getting a kitchen shower. One sharp edge of the skillet skinned one of his ears and cut it half off. As Peter touched up the servant of the high priest, the blood ran in a stream. The woman, seeing the gore and amazed at her own temerity, fell in a dead swoon. The girl escaped and ran over to our house. My father and mother hurried over, and kid-like, I followed. We found the preacher on his knees, praying over his wife, begging God for her recovery. He told us he had stumbled and fallen against the cook stove. My father took a stitch in the ecclesiastic's house, and washed off the blood of the lamb. The woman soon recovered and was put to bed. The girl took care of herself. She told my mother the truth of the incident, but was cautioned not to repeat it to others, and she didn't. The next Sunday, the holy man preached as usual, unctuous and oily, smiling and smirking, thundering ponderously betimes, warning us to flee the wrath to come. His daughter died at 18 of galloping consumption. One of the boys achieved considerable local fame as a horse thief. I believe he was the only one of that big family who reached maturity, and this was because he had a pachyderm hide and the art of gneiss. Several of the children died in babyhood. The rest ran the gamut of about all the diseases in the books, and finally the Lord's will was done. A long row of little white headstones in the village graveyard marks where they sleep. Freed from the strap, awaiting a glorious resurrection at the last great day. What killed them? The strap, I should say, carried to its logical limit, with a plentiful lack of love. Spare the rod and save the child. For love is life, and hate is death. Love is better than a cat o' nine tails, and Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, was a lobster, at least part of the time. Rendu à page 39, Purpled Ease. No quarter. We want all that you possess. We will be content with nothing less than all that you possess. We want in our hands the reins of power and the destiny of mankind. Here are our hands. They are strong hands. We are going to take your governments, your palaces, and all your purpled ease away from you. And in that day you shall work for your bread, even as the peasant in the field, or the starved and runty clerk in the metropolises. Here are our ends. They are strong ends. By Jack London. The above is taken from a postal card sent out by the publishers of Jack London's books. Jack is a Marxian socialist all day long, and he is much more frank than most of his party. All the other socialists I ever met alternately admit and deny that what they want is a division of property. Jack London stands by his guns and declares, "We want all you possess." And when he says "you," he means the people who own property. He is talking to the owners and managers of the tools, by which he means the railroads, mills, shops, stores, factories, mines, and steamships. That is to say, Jack is going to take things away from the present owners and give these things to we. Jack assumes that property in the hands of the socialist would be much better managed than it is now in the hands of those who own it. This threat of Jack's would be a tragic thing if Jack and his pals were really going to do all they say they are, but they are not going to do anything but talk. That is their hold. Folks who can do, those who can't, chin. Jack is a writing tramp who roams the world for thrills and copy. He is kindly, intelligent, amusing, indolent, and absolutely without the power to manage anything. Even his own tongue. He is a good fellow, and he makes folks think. In fact, he is the sparker of this paragraph. Jack made me think, he made me mad, he made me laugh, and he made me write. Personally, I like the rogue. He is most companionable, especially if you have no work to do. The tendency of property of every sort is towards depreciation and dissolution. Only eternal vigilance and tireless industry keep a manufacturing plant or a farm effective. Jack does not know this. Jack thinks that to own property is to be immune from work. The truth is, ownership is a responsibility and a burden. Most of the socialists I know do not work. They only talk about work. What they want is an orthodox heaven of ease, where the harps are always in tune and the robes are always laundered. If Jack could take away the property from those who have it and set them to work like peasants and runty clerks, then the socialists would live in purple ease, as Jack and many other childish, silly folks think that rich people do now. There is an idle rich class, but it is a very small class, and it is not made up of the people who manage things. It is made up of remittance men, and some of these are socialists who play at equality, badger the busy, and patronize the poor. Leave the idle rich to nemesis. Disease and death are at their heels. The men who operate our great enterprises, mills, factories, elevators, banks, and department stores, know nothing of ease. Their working hours are not limited by the whistle. They sweat blood to meet payrolls and to keep the wheels of trade revolving. Modern business is a most exacting taskmaster. It says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." It demands every ounce of energy its devotee has. The thought of a good time is not for the businessman. He works and works eternally. He works because he can't stop. And this is the man the socialists are going to send to the fields. Jack London's view of railroading is only from the bumpers. His philosophy cannot deceive the section hands, nor the train crew, nor the operators, nor the managers. They work and they work with care, precision, energy, and economy. Each one does the thing he can do best. That is what we all do. If Jack's hands were the strong hands he pretends, they would be grabbing plow handles or a shovel instead of reaching for hand-me-out. If the hands of Jack and his friends were strong enough, they would own this property towards which they now look with lustful eyes. The world will be redeemed. It is being redeemed. It is being redeemed not by those who shake the red rag of wordy warfare, who threaten and demand, but by its entrepreneurs, its workers, its inventors, its toilers, the men and women who do the duty that lies nearest them. The fallacy of the Jack philosophy lies in the assumption that the industries of the world would be much better managed by Jack and his Keith than by the men who are now at the helm. In other words, Jack's claim is that socialists are a peculiar, separate, and distinct class of able, unselfish, competent persons with hands especially strong, who accidentally are out of the game, but who are soon to take possession of the things and run everything in such a way that society will be blessed and benefited as never before. The fact is, socialists are not a separate and distinct class. We are all children of Adam and Eve, and the differences in us are more apparent than real. We all have our limitations. Read Carlyle. The weaknesses of humanity are inherent in socialists, only perhaps in greater degree. Their doctrine of reaching utopia through firing the men who now manage things is the doctrine of despair. Fabian socialism is something else. It is opportunism. It does what it can now. It does not wait for a revolution. Rather, it believes in revolution. Rather, it believes in evolution. So it does what it can now. It does not wait for a revolution. Rather, it believes in evolution. We climb step by step. Fabian socialism does not preach class hatred. In fact, it does not recognize that either the class or the mass exists. People who belong to one so-called class today are in another tomorrow. Most of our so-called predatory rich wiggled up out of the mass, and they may be poor again. Many of the poor will be rich. Watch the immigrants landing at Ellis Island. Can you prophesy to what class these boys and girls, curious, quaint, all frightened, will belong 20 years from now? Je vais commencer quelque part, je regardais de quoi. Désolé pour la disturbance. Rosanne J. Gendron, allô, tu lis full bien, tu supportes de long, full intéressant. Ouais, c'est full intéressant, hein. C'est vraiment cool. Je vais continuer de lire un peu. J'arrive au prochain chapitre. Many of the poor will be rich. Watch the immigrants landing at Ellis Island. Can you prophesy to what class these boys and girls, curious, quaint, half frightened, will belong 20 years from now? Many of them will be contractors, lawyers, bankers, scientists, doctors, teachers. It is all a matter of individual energy, intelligence, and desire, modified by the antics of the gods of chance. There is no conspiracy in America to hold people down and under. Class hatred, represented by Marxian socialism, says there is. There is nothing so savage, cruel, and blindly unjust as class hatred. I've been accused of class hatred because I make statements from time to time that seem to reveal a lack of appreciation for the three learned professions. Granted that I do, it is not the man I criticize, it is the office. Doctors, lawyers, and preachers are men caught in a certain environment, trying to win the world's plaudits and plunder in a certain way. I may consider the way a mistaken one, but I surely do not hate the man. And the fact that I have hundreds of close friends among the professions proves that I am not entirely misunderstood in this matter. Doctors are men, lawyers are men, preachers are men, So also are judges. Marxian socialists are men, and all these are very much like the people with whom they mix and associate. Rogue, rogue clients evolve rogue lawyers to do their work. Full patients evolve full doctors, and superstitious silly people in the pew secret a pretentious punk party in the pulpit. For the man himself I have only admiration, respect, and love, and sometimes pity. I may despise his business and some of his acts, but now can I hate the man when I realize that his life is a part of the great one from which mine is derived. This man may quit his business and take up something else. The criminal is not wholly a criminal, he is only a criminal at times. Some of his impulses are good, and most of them may be excellent, but one mistaken act will brand him forever as a criminal in the world's eyes. Under the same conditions, if I were of the same quality and temper, I would have done the same. If I criticize lawyers, doctors, and preachers, it is simply because there courses through my veins a quality and kind of corpuscle which fits me eminently for success either as a lawyer, doctor, or preacher. Hair perhaps divides the false and true, says old Omar. Yes, and I missed becoming a practicing physician by a hair. Had I gone into medicine, I would have had a team of bays, a coon driver, and a whiskers that would have put all the other doctors in my town to the bad. I have the fingers of a diagnostician, a voice that soothes, a presence that heals. If you didn't have it, I could convince both myself and you that you had. Then I would have cut into your cosmos to find out who was right, and I would have charged you $500 for the operation. If I were wrong in my diagnosis, you would never have known the difference. For an occasion, I can be discreet. The law is a game that lures. It isn't a matter of securing justice, not that. Truth has a secondary place in the practice of law, and only very ignorant folks imagine otherwise. The law is a game, and to play to win. The whole thing is fascinating. It is a clash of wits, mind matching mind. As a lawyer, I would have quibbled you 6 nights and days together, and I would have been a legal Lalapalooza. Bill Riley writes, "We are all touched with the essence of the thing against which we strive." And Bill is sometimes right. That is all we can expect, even from the wisest and best of men, and Bill is both. Yes, I would take kindly to the law, for guff, bluff, and stuff comes easily within my grasp. I can cross buttock a fact, sidestep an equity, befuddle a judge. Some judges carefully mix a jury, juggle with justice, put reason astride of a barbed wire fence, and prevent a witness from keeping his oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the fat fee would always reanimate any flagging zeal I might have as to the justice of my client's cause. As for the pulpit, I would take it now, were it not so securely fastened down. Hypocrisy, gush, glibness, Chicago tongue. Yes, let Billy Sunday look to his laurels. I too could tear a passion to tatters and make a judicious grieve. I could hypnotize myself into a belief that souls were lost, like color buttons under a bureau, and I was the one man to rescue them. Sure, especially am I qualified for making pastoral calls, or I was once. Also, I have great capacity for chicken pie, pretense, cheap social honors, and the applause of the unthinking. As a churchman, reversed haberdashery would have done me proud. Breeks would become me for my shanks have individuality, and a dinky hat would set off my sky piece in a way not only to arouse curiosity but mirth. Let Dean Art beware, his job is not so secure as he thinks. Dr. Samuel Johnson was for a time a member of Parliament in the capacity of cub reporter. One certain speech he reported, and when the gentleman who had made the speech read the report, he didn't exactly recognize it. So he went to Johnson and said, "Look here, young feller, I didn't say that." "Certainly not," said Johnson, "certainly not, but that is what you should have said." In recounting his report in recounting his reportorial experiences, Johnson was once asked this question: "What kind of men are there in the House of Commons?" And Johnson replied, "Take the first 50 men you find walking up Fleet Street." Johnson knew all Johnson that Johnson knew that all men, regardless of their condition in life, are at heart very much alike. And when fate has flung a man into a certain situation, the man will, if it is a place of some honor, give himself all the credit for having attained it. If it is a position that perhaps carries no honor, the party will always blame someone else for putting him there. We credit ourselves for our successes, we blame others for our faults. Also, we justify ourselves in everything we do. And wise men see plainly that this self justification is a part of nature's great law of self preservation. The exaggerated ego is a primal necessity. Good men, all and everywhere, multiply the value of their work by 10. Success in life consists in convincing yourself that you are the whole cheese, and then getting the world to accept your view. Rostan's rooster was fully assured in his own mind that the sun would not come up if he did not crow. The hens, being told this by the rooster, crackled it back to him, and it became a crystallized part of the orthodox zeitgeist. And it would have so remained for all time, but for an accident of love. When a guinea hen became enamored of the boss of the barnyard. So life is a paradox, and love is not only illusion, but it is also the great enlightener. Now, I know Jack London, I know the proletariat, I know the predatory rich, and this I know, that so far as happiness is concerned, each and all of them have an equal portion. The struggle in getting out of the mass has given Jack's predatory party a certain power, but he has paid for it with his peace of mind, and as to struggle to hold it. Purpled ease is a thing that exists only in Jack's mental vacuum. That is where the tramp has the start of the millionaire. The tramp can dream it, the other fellow has no time even to think it. When John Wesley saw the condemned criminal being taken to Tyburn Tree, he turned to his friend and exclaimed, "But for the grace of God, there goes John Wesley." When Walt Whitman looked upon the wounded and dying soldier, he said, "I am that man." Emerson wrote in his essay on justice, "I have in me the capacity for every crime." And here is what I say to Jack London. If you and your pals were in possession of the tools of trade, you would commit all the so-called crimes of which you accuse the industrial leaders and more. The fact that your heart is full of hate proves your unfitness to govern. These men now in power have climbed step by step to their present position, and at every step had to prove their worth before they were allowed to go on. These tools of which you speak are sharp, and men like you, unskilled in their use, would cut others with them, and they in turn would take the tools and cut your head off. Your hands are not as strong as you imagine. The strength of the hands of man is not proven by assertion, it is proven by use. How far can you put the shot? Power unrestrained is always tragic. The world is held in place by the opposition of forces. The men in power are ballasted by responsibility as never before in history. You have your use as an agitator, so go for it, Jack, and say your say. That fly on the wheel of the chariot of Achilles said, "Oh, just see what a dust we do kick up." And this remark of the fly has added to the gaiety of nations. but get enough flies on the chariot of Achilles, and not a wheel revolves. The Egyptians in Moses' time battled with swarms of flies. When the flies scored home runs and base hits, self-interest and the tug of inertia have hypnotized you, Jack, until you, being down in the gutter, through choice, see only your side. Yet your barbaric yap is being heard, and I am your antipodal organ, passing it along. Meanwhile, you ride on the bumpers provided by the thrusts, and these bumpers carry you forward to your destination. The pie you eat is made by the pie trust, yet you find it palatable and ask for more. If the pie trust didn't make good pies and sell them at a fair valuation, housewives would make their own pies, or they might find pie timber too expensive, and then you would go pieless. The great consolidated industries serve society, and their very existence turns on their ability to minister and to help. That which does not serve dies. If the trust overcharge, they invite competition and dissolution. Success lies in cooperation and reciprocity, and the hope of the future is in fact that the world knows it. We can't go back to chaos and start over. We must go on. Light lies ahead, not behind. We are not going to take off the train crews and put the trams in possession. There are accidents occasionally now, but there would be more then. Safety lies in getting rid of the trams. One wide awake, vigilant man at the switch is worth more to society than all the tramps who ride the brake beams. Get to work, Jack, and if you can't find the job you want, then take the one you can get. To prove yourself able to wrestle a big job, get busy and take care of a little one. Power does not reveal itself in scolding. And with all you're getting, get busy. Yours for the evolution. Rendu à la page 57. Je vais prendre une mini pause. Mini pause. Je vais encore être là, donc. Puis je vais repartir. On est rendu à la page 57. Consecrated Lives. Il reste encore de la batterie, donc le live il va pas s'arrêter tant que j'ai de la batterie. Fait que ça c'est bien, il me reste genre 22%. Fait que on est bien. Faut que je prenne une petite pause là parce que ça fait mal à la gorge après un bout de lire. Oups, désolé. désolé pour le monde qui écoute là, c'est dégueulasse. En plus, celui-là, j'ai le droit de le lire. C'est entièrement légal ce que je suis en train de faire là. 1916, ça devrait être ouvert de droit. Par contre, celui que je disais juste avant, là, celui du Dalai Lama, ça j'ai pas le droit. Pourtant, c'était intéressant, mais j'ai pas le droit de le lire. Mais je vais le lire pareil, mais j'ai pas le droit. Putain, c'est bon l'eau. Waouh. C'est la vie l'eau. Bon. Donc, je vais un peu plus, puis ensuite je vais marcher. C'est chaud. Ouais, c'est parti. Page 57. Le nom du chapitre, c'est Consecrated Lives. Ça, c'est le chapitre qui m'a fait originalement commencer à even lire des livres, puis les enregistrer. Je venais de lire ça, il était tard, puis j'étais tellement passionné par le truc, genre c'était comme waouh, comment il a réussi à comme dire ça, c'est fou. Puis bah, c'est ça, je l'ai enregistré parce que je trouvais que c'était valuable. And here we are. Consecrated lives. Here's a thought, dearie, that I give to you because I haven't a very firm grasp upon it myself. In order to clarify my mind, I explain to you, and thus, probably, do I give you something which is already yours. Grateful, of course you are. There. The thought is this. But before I explain it, let me tell of what a man saw a certain cottage in Denmark. And it was such a little whitewashed cottage, too, with a single solitary rose bush clambering over the door. an artist, his wife, and their little girl lived there. There were 4 rooms only in this cottage: a kitchen, a bedroom, a workroom, and the other room. The kitchen was for cooking, the bedroom for sleeping, the workroom for work, and the other room was where the occupants of the cottage received their few visitors. When the visitors remained for tea or lunch, the table was spread in the other room, but usually the artist, his wife, and their little girl ate their meals in the kitchen or in summer on the porch at the back of the house. Now, the artist painted pictures and his wife carved beautiful shapes in wood, but they didn't make much money. In fact, no one seemed to know them at all. They didn't have funds to accumulate a library and perhaps would not if they had, but still they owned all the books written by George Brandes. These books were kept in a curious little case, which the artist and his wife themselves had made. And before the case of books was an ancient Roman lamp suspended from the ceiling by a chain, and the lamp was kept always lighted night and day. Each morning before they tasted food, the man and his wife read from George Brandes, and then they silently refilled, trimmed, and made the lamp all clean and tidy. Ho ho! Why your eyes are filling with tears? How absurd! And you want to hear more about the artist and his wife and the little girl, but bless me, that is all I know about them. However, I do know that George Brandes is one of the apostles of the better day. His message is a plea for beauty, that is to say, harmony. He would have us live lives of simplicity, truth, honesty, and gentleness. He would have us work for harmony and love instead of for place and power. George Brandes is an individualist and a symbolist. He thinks all of our belongings should mean much to us and that great care should be exercised in selection. We need only a few things, but each of these things should suggest utility, strength, harmony, and truth. All of our actions must be suggestive of peace and right. Not only must we speak truth, but we must live it. Our lives should be consecrated to the good, life consecrated to truth and beauty. Consecrated lives. And so this artist and his wife I told you of were priests of beauty, and their little girl was a neophyte, and the room where the Roman lamp burned was filled with the holiness of beauty, and no unkind thought or wrong intent could exist there. Consecrated lives, that is the subject. There is a brotherhood of such, and you can reach out and touch fingertips with the members the round world over. Beauty is an unseen reality, an attempt to reveal a spiritual condition. Members of this brotherhood of consecrated lives do not take much interest in political policies, and all the blatant blowing of brass horns that are used on change in pulpits or by 4th of July speakers are to them trivial and childish. They distinguish at once the note of affection, hypocrisy, and pretense in it all. They know its shallowness, its selfishness, and its extremely transient quality. Yet your man of the consecrated life may mix with the world and do the world's business, but for him it is not the true world, for hidden away in his heart he keeps burning a lamp before a shrine dedicated to a love and beauty. The adept only converses at his best with an adept, and he does this through self-protection. To hear the world's coarse laugh in his holy of holies, no. And so around him is a sacred circle, and within it only the elect are allowed to enter. To join this brotherhood of consecrated lives requires no particular rites of initiation, no ceremonial, no recommendations. You belong when you are worthy. But do not for a moment imagine you have solved the difficulty when you have once entered. To pride yourself on your entrance is to run the danger of finding yourself outside the pale with password hopelessly forgotten. Within the esoteric lines are circles and inner circles, and no man yet has entered the inmost circle where the Ark of the Covenant is secreted. All is relative. But you know you belong to the brotherhood When you feel the absolute nothingness of this world of society, churches, fashion, politics, and business, and realize strongly the consciousness of the unseen world of truth, love, and beauty. The first emotion coming into the brotherhood is one of loneliness and isolation. You pray for comradeship, and empty arms reach out into the darkness. But gradually, you awaken to the thought that you are one of many who hope and pray alike, and that slowly this oneness of thought and feeling is making its impress felt. Then, occasionally, you meet one of your own. This one may be socially high or low, rich or poor, young or old, man or woman, but you recognize each other on sight and hold sweet converse. Then you part, mayhap, never to meet again. But you are each better, stronger, nobler for the meeting. Consecrated lives. You meet and you part, but you each feel a firmer impulse to keep the light burning, the altar, light to truth, simplicity, and beauty. No other bond is required than that of devotion to truth, the passion of listening in the silence, the prayer for wholeness and harmony, the earnest desire to have your life reflect the good. All man made organization would be fatal to the sweet, subtle, and spiritual qualities of the brotherhood. For organization means officers, judicial robes, livery, arbitrary differentiation, and all the vile and foolish claptrap of place and power. It means it means the wish to dictate, select and exclude, and this means jealousy, prejudice and bitterness. 15 candidates for a vacant bishopric with heartaches to match. No organization ever contained within its rank the best. Organization is arbitrary and artificial. It is born of selfishness, and at the best is a mere matter of expediency. The brotherhood of consecrated lives admits all who are worthy, and all who are excluded exclude themselves. If your life is to be a genuine consecration, you must be free. Only the free man is truthful. Only the heart that is free is pure. How many compose this brotherhood? Who shall say? There are no bagged statisticians, no paid proselytes, with their noisy boasting. To constitute a congregation, and where they commune is a temple. Many belong who do not know it. Others there be who think others there be who think they belong and are so sure of it that they do not. But the brotherhood is extending its line. And what think you the earth will be like when the majority of men and women in it learn that to be simple and honest and true is the part of wisdom, and that to work for love and beauty is the highest good? C'est vraiment spooky les vieux livres parce que tu manipules le truc et t'es comme est-ce que je suis en train de comme le briser au complet en le lisant genre. Mais bref, vraiment un bon livre. Je suis rendu à la page 65, Marriage and Divorce. So, Marriage and Divorce. My old co-ed college chum, Winifred Black, has recently propounded this question. Why are husbands lobsters? So I'll explain to Winifred the cause of this sad state which devolutes a lover into a lobster. It's like this. The rule is that the male of the genus Homo is never any better than he has to be. Having said this much, let me further add that this truth also applies to the female of the genus Homo. A marriage that is practically indissoluble gives the man security in his position. He is not obliged to win favors. He merely exercises his rights. As for the woman, she has him, and when she reminds him of the fact, hell is to pay. The man who stands on his rights, thinks about his rights, talks of his rights, belong to the lobsteria. He has ceased to be either loving or lovable. The only right any man should have is the right to be decent, that is, to be agreeable and useful. One of nature's chief intents in sex is to bring about beauty, grace, and harmony. The flowing mane and proud step of the horse, the flamboyant tail of the peacock, the song of the bird, the perfume and color of the flowers, are all sex manifestations, put forth with intent to attract, plead, and fascinate. Charm of manner is a sex attribute which has become a habit. The creative principle in all art is a secondary sex manifestation. The average married man feels that he is immune from the necessity of winning, pleasing, charming. He owns property. He is a Turk, and from the Turk and the comet, good Lord, deliver us. Public opinion is the great natural restraining force. We are ruled by public opinion, not by statute law. If statute law express the zeitgeist, it is well, but often law hampers and restrains public opinion. Divorce laws are obsolete in their character and should die the death. A marriage that cannot be dissolved tends to tyranny. There is a rudimentary something in man that makes him a tyrant, that divides humanity into master and slave, and to these barbaric instincts we are heir. The business of civilization is to make man free, and freedom means responsibility. The curse of marriage is that it makes the parties immune from very much of that gentle consideration which freedom bestows. Freedom in divorce is the one thing that will transform the marital boor into a gentleman. Freedom in divorce is the one thing that will abolish the domestic steamroller. Freedom in divorce is the one thing that will correct the propensity to nag in both male and female. We gain freedom by giving it. We hold love by giving it. We hold love by giving it away. To enslave another is to enslave yourself. Constancy, unswerving and eternal, is only possible where man and woman are free. Marriage was first a property right. The woman was owned by the man. She was a chattel. He had the right of talking. He had the right of taking her life if she attempted to escape or was otherwise unruly. Then the priest came in and declared marriage a sacred right. They brazenly declared that the marriage where they did not officiate was no marriage at all, that it was base and unholy alliance, and that the children were illegitimate. The relationship of man and woman was to them a sin and a shame, but by their approval it was redeemed and made proper and right. To grant a divorce was to admit that the right did not take. Hence, divorce was taboo. The church isn't interested in divorce. All the church is fighting for is to hold its position. Then comes civil marriage, which is a contract between the man and the woman from which neither party can withdraw without laying the whole matter before the courts and the newspapers. And the sacredness of contract takes the place of the sacredness of the right. I would hold my friend by no stronger tie than the virtue that is in my soul, said the gentle Emerson. Easy divorce would make divorce unnecessary in a vast number of cases, because it would put men and women on their good behavior, and thus do away with incompatibility. That which tends to increase charm of manner cannot be bad. That which tends to conform a lover into a lobster is not wholly good. All over the United States there is a general demand for a uniform divorce law. This is right and well, and the way to bring about this uniformity is to do away with all divorce laws. If divorce were free, it would probably be no more frequent than it is now. Marriage should be difficult and divorce easy. As it is now, any preacher will marry anything to anybody for 50 cents. Nightly clergymen are aroused from sleep to marry couples out of the second-story window. Marriages occur in circus rings, balloons, show window, and yesterday I heard of a wedding in an automobile going to the high clutch at speed limit, with Papa's car opening the cutoff close behind in hot pursuit. Bum lum de dum. Marriage is so serious a matter that it should not be entered upon lightly. The old plan of publishing the bans was founded on common sense. The couple about to embark should be compelled to take a full month to think about it, and persons absolutely unfit should be debarred. But once entered upon, just two people know whether the venture is a success, and they are the man and the woman. In the name of freedom, let the only parties who are vitally interested decide the issue. Divorce is an heroic remedy for an awful condition. It is the culmination of a fearful tragedy. I know of nothing worse than incompatibility. There is no hell equal to the hell of having to live with a person who is not your own. Either party who wants a divorce should have it, and the proof that it is desired should be reason sufficient for granting it. Make your way for liberty. It isn't the law that brings a man and a woman together, and no law should be invoked to hold them together. The police should keep their heavy hands off. What can an outside party know of this most subtle and delicate of all human relations? The love of man for woman and of woman for man is the most powerful and persistent force in the universe. And man, in his greed, has seized upon it and attempted to regulate it from Harrisburg, Hartford, and Helena. Now, there are many folks who think it should be looked after from the District of Columbia. God help us all. Just lift off the roofs and take a look at social Washington some night at 4 a.m. The lawyer here steps in and becomes as insistent and as dogmatic as the priest. Once you could marry only through the ministrations of a priest. Now you can secure a divorce only through the services of a lawyer. Often a dozen are employed, counting both sides. Why make life difficult, complex, and heavy? Cries Emerson. And well does he ask the question. This supreme thing in life, our love, cannot be regulated by man's law. The supreme power that made, fashioned, and gave it to us provided for its automatic regulation. When love, honor, and respect die, it is time, in the name of purity, to part. No priest can consecrate the holy relationship of a man and a woman, but God can and does. Love is the only consecration, and love is enough. To imagine that God should endow us with this mighty passion and then leave its regulation to those who govern us for consideration is an insult to the divine intelligence of which we are a part. The mating of a man and a woman is the one sacred thing in life, and left alone, it is lovely and true in all its attributes. In law, they will tell you that the plaintiff has all the rights his contract gives him, and no more. In nature, a man should have all the rights which love bestows, and no more. And when I speak of man, I mean woman, too, for there is the male man and the female man. I believe in equality, the equality of nature, or, if you please, of God. I do not believe in the law interposing and giving a man rights and a woman privileges. Neither do I understand why the money a woman earns should belong to a man, unless we first grant the righteousness of master and slave, and frankly admit that the man owning the woman also owns per se all that she produces, including her children. God has decided who the children belong to. They belong to the woman who bore them and whose body nourished them. But man steps in and makes laws about a mother's instincts. Man and woman mate, and being mated, cleave together until death do them part, and longer. The whom God had joined together no man can put asunder. The mischievous meddling of man leads to a condition where the parties think they own each other. This is slavery. Many married men treat any other woman with more respect than they treat their wives. The gallantry that holds through gentle treatment and just is gone when the man thinks he holds a warranty deed for the property. To be free, you must be on your good behavior, and do not for a moment imagine that a man would leave his mate if law did not manacle him to her. He is held by an unseen silken cord as strong as fate, as constant as life, as persistent as death. Whither thou goest, I will go, and thy people shall be my people. The divine attraction which brings the right man and the right woman together must be trusted as strong and sufficient enough to hold them. When you treat them as rats baited into a trap from which escape is impossible, you dissolve the main idea and interpose the thought of escape. And this is what makes so many married men and women stray in their sleep and tread the borderland of folly. I would hold my mate by the supreme integrity of my love for her and by no other bond, and this once fixed in the minds of men and women would make for constancy. Nothing is more terrible in life than to break and sunder human relations. To be true to your own is the natural thing, because it is the right thing. It is the only policy that pays. Happiness lies in loyalty. This applies to any field of human endeavor. The race knows it now for the first time in history. Truth is the new virtue, and truth is a virtue because it reduces the perplexity of life and brings good results. The love of man for woman and of woman for man and of both for their children is a divine instinct. When you bolster and brace it by political blacksmiths and shuddering shysters, you doubt its constancy, and what is worse, you suggest the doubt to the very people you seek to fetter. The greatest line ever written by Humboldt was this: the universe is governed by law. But he did not refer to the laws of man. He referred to the laws of nature, or, if you please, the laws of God. Although Humboldt in his latter years never used the word God, I believe in the blessed trinity of man, woman, and child. These to me express divinity. Left alone, the woman would be the companion, friend, and helpmeet of the man, not his slave, pet, plaything, drudge, doormat, and scullion. Happiness lies in equality. The effort you put forth to win the woman, you should be compelled to exercise through life in order to hold her, and you will hold her by so long as love kisses the lips of death, and the dimpled hands of the babe encircle the neck of its father. The house of the Arlo exists because love is given, feathered, blindfolded, and sold in the marketplace. There is nothing so pulls on the heartstring of the normal healthy man as the love for wife and child. Always and forever, he wears them in his hearts of hearts. To imagine that he would forsake them for the husks of license, unless looked after by jaggers and jaggers, is to doubt the wisdom of the Creator. In our hearts, divine wisdom implanted the seeds of loyalty and right. These are a part of the great plan of self-preservation. We do not walk off the cliff because we realize that to do so would mean death. Make men and women free, and they will travel by the eternal guiding stars. That which makes for self-respect in men and women, putting each on his good behavior, increasing the sum of goodwill, and lessening hate, will have a most potent influence on future generations. I cannot imagine a worse handicap than to be tumbled into life by incompatible parents and be brought up in an atmosphere of strife. We have bred from the worst in the worst possible way, and the result is a race of scrubs, says Alfred Russel Wallace. All that tends to tyranny in parents manifests itself in slavish traits in the children. Freedom is a condition of mind, and the best way to secure it is to breed it. So I say, make marriage difficult by demanding notification and a pause. then make divorce free on application of either party. Do you remember the woman who wanted a divorce if she couldn't get it? And if she could, did not want it. No one wants a divorce from his own. This would be the one horrible and appalling thing in life, that life be automatic. Make room for the divine. And in this article, I have only stated what all thinking men and women know and believe, but which they, wisely, decline to say or even admit. Therefore, I have said it for them. We will now listen to the Anvil chorus. Je suis rendu à la page 79, Taxation of Church Property. I am in receipt of a very interesting letter from the Reverend A.B. Taylor, Lakeside, New York, in which he says that he reads the Fra with much pleasure and profit, and often receives valuable help therefrom in compiling his sermons. Orthodox Methodists, and the fact that I am able to express for him, in degree, many of the things he holds as truth is one of the encouraging signs of the times. It is friendly, and beautiful in Dr. Taylor to write me his acknowledgments. But after writing the letter, he adds a postscript. I might say that I have a suspicion he wrote the beautiful letter in order to add the postscript, but I will not. Here is the P.S. One thing I do not like, and cannot comprehend, is why you so wrongfully advocate the taxing of church property. Then he encloses a column clipping from the Christian work of evangelists, wherein the reason for exemption of church property from taxation are fully set forth. Very seldom does one get the entire argument at first hand, but here it all is, skillfully presented. I give it in its entirety. The worst enemy New York has, or any city has, is the perennial critic who would tax the churches. Bon, il y a bien des chars dehors. Je dis que j'allais respirer du bon air en ouvrant la porte, mais... Some interesting correspondence has recently been going on in one of the New York papers over this matter. Someone by the name of Hubbard discovered that there were several $1 million worth of property in churches which was untaxed. The critic supported this argument by statements that the churches are not direct public servants, as are schools and hospitals, that they exist to teach certain doctrines of their own, differing among themselves, and which have no direct relation to the public good. Some of the doctrines, indeed, being pernicious, according to this critic. The short-sightedness of all this is apparent to the most superficial mind. The policy of taxing the churches would be almost suicidal to any town or city. The churches save New York 50 times what the city loses in tax from them. Here are a few facts which, when perceived, stop all such talk at once. The church is the greatest police force in the community. The Roman Catholic Church alone, we mention that church because it practices the negative doctrine of restraint more than do the Protestant churches, restrains hundreds of thousands of men and women from petty crimes that would cost New York more than all her courts and police and jails and prisons have cost her 4 years. Take the churches out of New York for 10 years and it would be an unsafe city to live in, and the expense of administering its criminal courts and prisons would bankrupt it. As a matter of fact, the teaching of any particular theological doctrine is the smallest part of any work the churches do. Go into any church in New York and you will find that fully three-fourths of all the efforts are being directly expended in making good citizens. In Sunday school, the children are being taught honesty, purity, brotherhood, ambition, and the unselfish life. Fully two-thirds of the sermons of the average preacher are direct inspirations of the moral life or instructions in ethics. We venture to say that had our friend collected 50 of the sermons preached in New York last Sunday, he would have found 49 which dealt with practical religious life, to one on the doctrine, say, of the future life. Of course, there are millions of people who have found in their experience that the peculiar doctrines, as our friends call them, produce the highest type of citizenship. As a matter of fact, the main efforts of the churches of New York are put on producing honest and altruistic men. Heaven only knows what would become of the city if its 1,400 churches were crippled by great taxes. It is bad enough now. The police service the churches render New York saves the city millions every year. The service of furnishing her with honest and unselfish men cannot be put in numbers. There are none large enough. It will please It will please be noticed that the editor of the Christian work of Evangelists starts his article by informing us who the worst enemy of New York or any city actually is. This worst enemy, according to my Christian colleague, is the critic who would tax the churches. Thus, before he attempts to reply to the critic, he denounces the critic as not only an enemy of the state, but its worst enemy. Grafters, thieves, dealers in dope, procureur, sweatshop fiends, murderers, all take second place. The worst enemy of a city, any city, is the man who advocates the taxation of church property. The editor himself is a Christian, a church member, and a clergyman. Thus he stands as a sample of the head, hand, and heart of the modern church member. I think so. He is a man of education, of position, honored and respected in his denomination. And he tells us that people who disagree with him in a matter of finance are not only the enemies of the state, but its worst enemies. A traitor to God is a traitor to his country. Thus did religious fanaticism once link the heretic and the traitor as one. To disagree with the prevailing religion was to be regarded as the foe of society. How hard the tyrants die! Yet many clergymen believe that it would be better to put church property on an absolute parity with all other property. In fact, many churches now voluntarily pay taxes. The great and influential congregation presided over by Rabbi Leonard Levy of Pittsburgh requested the assessors to tax their synagogue at its cost valuation of $300,000. In Toronto is a Baptist church, the Jarvis Street Baptist Church. I believe that has paid taxes on its property for more than 20 years because the congregation voting on the question decided that an evasion of taxes on the part of a church because it did good was really no better than the exemption of an individual for the same reason. The enemy of the state, forsooth, is the man who asks someone to pay a few paltry dollars for police and fire protection. Naturally, one might say the enemy of the state is the man who refuses to pay his quota of expenses for the maintenance of the government machinery. The editor of Christian Work and Evangelist is a clergyman. He is paid by the religious denomination he serves. This denomination has large holdings of real estate, upon which it pays no taxes. If it paid taxes, it would not have so much money to pay clergymen. Therefore, one of its leading clergymen, acting as spokesman for the rest, defines for us the worst enemy of New York, or any city. Thus, you get the quality of logic that rules in our churches. It would be laughable were it not pitiable in its weakness. The church isn't dead. It can still call vile names. How nimbly it yet flings the theologic stinkpot. The fires of the auto da fe are not extinguished, they are only banked. banked in the editorial office of the Christian Work and Evangelist. The worst enemy of New York or any city. It is the old cry of away with him. It is the cry of entrenched tyranny. That he who disagrees with you in religious matters is the enemy of the state. Socrates spoke disrespectfully of the gods, and for this they brewed for him the hemlock. The crime of Jesus was that he undermined the state. Savonarola, Bruno, Latimer, Wycliffe, enemies of society, all. The editor of the Christian Work and Evangelist thinks that the state and religion are one, and he is right. For just as long as the state grants immunity from taxation to church property, the divorce is not complete. We haven't yet caught up with Thomas Jefferson. Well, you know what the state in